Short barrels, 9mm versus 45 ACP, and what we have today is our Federal Punch ammunition. Punch ammunition is an interesting ammunition. It's very similar to HST, but it's a little bit less expensive, and it's more of kind of like a civilianized version of the Federal HST. The way I look at Federal Punch is kind of like the way you'd look at critical defense compared to critical duty. Critical duty is oftentimes plus P. It's made for longer barreled service size handguns, but the critical defense is meant for shorter barrel stuff, and it's cheaper, a little bit cheaper, but not by much. As where our Federal Punch is kind of similar to that concept, except it is a lot cheaper than the HST. You know, I would say over 50%, more to get the HST versus like the 9mm punch. So yeah, it is a pretty good ammo for the price. So I'm going to do this test from our short barrels here. Both of these are standard pressure. I'm going to use my Taurus G2C with a 3.2 inch barrel to test the 9mm, and my M&P 45 Shield with the 3.3 inch barrel to test the 45 ACP. We have a 1/10 of an inch longer barrel here, but it just so happens that 45 ACP is about a 1/10 of an inch longer than 9mm. So that makes almost exactly, the perfect amount of barrel travel between both of those to get a good idea how these are going to perform in a short barrel. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No fabric in a way that can potentially clog a hollow point. And then we'll move on to doing more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So 3 inches and 16 inches is more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches in a real living target. So if we pass out the back of the rib simulation and go past 3 inches more past that, there is a possibility those rounds could pass through an average size individual. So we try to keep them in this first block, and that would say that they're pretty successful. So we'll do a plain clear ballistic shot, best potential, to see what we get for expansion, and then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these and see how well I can control the recoil of that 45. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm. This is rated at 1150 feet per second. Our 45 ACP is rated at 890 feet per second. That's probably through a 4-inch 9mm and a 5-inch semi-auto. I didn't look that up. That's general practice. Sometimes the 45 is rated through a 4-inch barrel, but this is rated at 1150 feet per second. Let's see how close I get to that with my 3.2 inch Taurus G2C. $11.33. 11:18, 11:05, 11:08, 11:17. So that's not bad velocity overall, because it is such a short barrel. Now 890 is our rating with our 45 ACP. Let's see what we get with this. $761, 709. 715, 710, 745. That is a 230 grain, but I'm pretty disappointed with that velocity because I ran the cheapest ball ammo through this in 230 grain, and we were going a lot faster than that. So this is loaded pretty light for a 45 ACP. I'm doubting we're going to see any expansion with fabric in the way, but let's hit our ballistics gel block anyway and see how these all compare. All right, so first up we're going to do our plain clear ballistics shot, so no denim or fabric in the way that can potentially clog that hollow point, no rib simulation that could potentially slow down its penetration. I'm not sure what to expect with that 45 in this plain clear ballistics shot. I'm pretty confident we won't see expansion through our fabric and rib simulation, but I don't know if we'll see it in plain clear ballistics or not. We'll see it in plain clear ballistics with our 9mm though, so let's see what we get with our 9mm. Plain clear ballistics. All right. Now let's hit it with our 45 ACP. Let's go take a look. right, so we did get some expansion with that 45 in plain clear ballistics. So at least we see that, but I'm not hopeful on that once we put that fabric in there. So actually, when we look at our paths here, they actually look very similar. And that's one of those things here with the Federal Punch and the HST that I like. I would say out of all the different 9mm rounds, Federal's HST and Punch are pretty much the best, because they kind of have it down to a science where they're opening up right away. And when we first enter this first gel block here after going through 3 inches, it has a huge wound track there. A lot of times 9mm will go through here and won't leave much of a hole through the MDF when I have that in place, and then only at about 5, 6, 7 inches does it start to open up. And that kind of accounts for why 9mm sometimes has not been particularly effective in self-defense scenarios. But this type of ammo, they've learned how to make it right with the 9mm. So this 9mm is right. First 3 inches, almost exactly the same, I would say, as far as the damage it's putting in there. Maybe a hair more with the 45. And then up until about maybe 6 inches, it looks like about the same. But then right about here, 7 inches, it almost looks like the 9mm, it makes a larger wound path, which is interesting. But what we got going on here with our 9mm is 17.5 inches. So that's pretty much textbook penetration that we want to see. Good expansion. Our 45 ACP, I'm going to call it about 14.25 inches of penetration, and again, really good expansion. So now let's see how these will do in our real world simulation. We'll put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how they do. All right, our real world simulation: 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Let's see how our 9mm does in our real world simulation. All right, let me set that all back up, and then we'll hit it with the 45 ACP. All right, 45 ACP real world simulation. I'm guessing no expansion, penetration into the second block, but let's see what we get here. Let's go take a look. All right, I was proven way wrong. I can't believe that did that. And it's funny because the expansion isn't even that big. Now, what we can see here, I'm going to accuse Federal of this. A lot of companies are doing this, and kind of rightfully so. They're spending a lot of time into making 9mm really good because they understand that that's the preferred caliber for law enforcement now. So they want something that, you know, even if it's in hands of people that are not particularly strong or big, that they're just going to have something that's going to perform really well. So I commend them for that, but it's like they're not spending a whole lot of time on the other calibers. First 3 inches, way more energy dump with our 9mm than our 45. Now, rib simulation here. Yeah, our 9mm made a significantly bigger hole than the 45 because it's expanded right away. Now, I will say this right here is not typical for most 9mm jacketed hollow points. They generally do expand, but they generally make a hole about this big, and then once they go in here a little bit, then they expand. This is actually what you do want to see. You want to see it expand right away so that after it busts through ribs, now you have a significantly larger, sharper bullet that's going to have much greater odds of clipping something vital, and that's why that matters. With this, that's pretty bad, but at the same time, it started out as a 45, so even moderate expansion with 45 is bigger than most of my 327 Federal expansion is generally going to be smaller than this mediocre expansion here when the 327's, you know, expanded out massively. So it does look like at this point the 45 almost has more damage rate there than the 9mm, but The 9mm just has a straighter path. It looks like it hit the back rib simulation potentially. I don't see a mark, so it didn't quite poke out that block. So what we got going on here with our 9mm, it did bounce back a little bit, but I'm gonna say we went, I'm gonna say 18 3/4 inches, which is not really over penetration in my book, because it didn't even pass through this back rib simulation. So if it ain't gonna pass through an average size attacker, then that's not really over penetration. So that's really good penetration, a good amount of damage. Our 45 ACP, we stopped right here. I know sometimes parallax will throw these numbers off. It'll look like it's somewhere else, but 13 3/4 inches of penetration. So overall, you know, both of these were consistent. You know, if you see the penetration on the 9mm, both the bullets are stopped at roughly the same place, and both of the 45s are stopped at roughly the same place. So what that's going to tell you is, ribs or not, they're both pretty consistent. So on a technical note, our 9mm did better. Do I think that the 9mm would do better than the 45 in the real world? In this situation, I'm going to say they were going to be pretty similar. I'm going to say they're going to be about as effective as each other, with a kind of underperforming 45 with the standard performing 9mm. So either one of these would serve the purpose pretty well, in my opinion. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'm going to shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy, shootability I can get, and most importantly, how well can I control that 45. So let's do that. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 9mm and our 45 ACP. Big difference on their overall expanded size. That 9mm expanded quite well, but the 45 is just massive. So it's kind of hard to argue with that. I mean, if you did not hit fabric or ribs and this did expand to this big, it's kind of hard to say that wouldn't do better, because if it's got more sharp petals, it's going to adequate depths, it's probably going to be more effective than the 9mm. You just have bigger area, bigger hole, more likely odds of hitting something vital. Now when we go through our real world simulation here, things change up a lot. Honestly, this isn't a whole lot different than what I've seen in the longer barrel, my 5.3-inch Glock. I think I had exactly the same phenomenon going on, where one side expanded but the other didn't. So that's why we have that weird arcing up in the gel block. Now our 9mm almost looks the same as what it did through plain gel. So applause to Federal for that, because that's a rarity in ammo, to have the one going through the real world simulation perform about as well as the one through plain gel. And part of the reason for that is they use extremely thick petals. So once they open up, they're not going to fold back the way a lot of hollow point petals do. So that's a really fantastic overall short barrel or longer barrel load. It's perfect. There's a little bit to be desired here with this. That being said, if we actually look at the overall size here, you know, you can't really say that the 9mm is necessarily going to cut a bigger hole or do better. It's just that it is more consistent because of its higher velocity. So I would say both of these, based on, you know, the real world simulation and based on the plain gel shot here, based on everything, I would say they're pretty equally matched. You're not going to have a huge advantage by going to a 45 in this particular ammo, but yeah, there could be some advantages. Like I think that this would go in a straighter line going through a windshield, because if you hit a windshield, it's not going to expand. It's going to kind of fold in a little bit and stay solid. That's likely to have a lot more energy on the other side, let's say a windshield or a car door, than the 9mm. But for the average person, I would say they're about the same. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm just going to get a front sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target and see if there's really a big difference between our 9mm and our 45. So 9mm. They'll shoot really good. Now 45, up until this point I filmed a couple things here when I was missing a lot with the 45. That's because I didn't have my sights quite adjusted right. I'm going to use the standard grip for this test here, so it's a little bit harder to control with that, but I'm doing it on purpose just to get a realistic feel here of how I would probably be carrying this thing. And I did get my sights adjusted to the right. I was doing it backwards because I have dyslexia. I was shooting left, so I'm adjusting it left, and this is a big mess, but I got adjusted to the right now, so it should work better for me. So 45 ACP. All right, that shoots pretty good too. That shoots pretty good for a 45. You know, the recoil isn't any greater than that 9mm, and I know you're gonna be like, what? And when I mean recoil, I mean is the actual feeling in my hand. You know, how much does it beat up my hand? And it doesn't really feel any different between the two. The 45 does have more muzzle jump. I'm not going to deny that. It jumps up a little bit more, so you got to take a little bit more time to get it back down on target. But as far as actual recoil, like, does that hurt different than the 9mm? No, which is pretty impressive because this is a thinner grip. So let me back it up from some distance and shoot at the target just for fun now. All right, 75 yards from the target just for fun. So I just want to see where these things will hit. And to be honest here, I love doing stuff like this. And I know there's no practical purpose when it comes to self-defense, but I kind of grew up doing a lot of just various experiments with ballistics, even as a kid with slingshots and whatnot. And I've always found it fun, you know, if you get different size projectiles, you launch them real far, how long it takes to get there, you know, what it does when it gets there, all that kind of stuff. I always find that really fun and interesting. So that's really why I like doing that. Plus it gives me an idea of the outer limits of my handguns. Can I hit from 75 yards? So that's for fun. Let's see how I can do with our 9mm. I think I was just overthinking it there as I just popped them off last couple shots and I was able to hit. Now this, I'm not sure where this is going to hit. So I'm just going to aim center mass and see where they go. Had to rack around in there. Ooh, quite a bit low. I thought I missed, and then I heard it. Rarely do I ever see that thing actually wobbling around from a hit from this distance where I'm seeing sunlight go back and forth, but I am seeing that with this. I aimed at the head on that silhouette thinking they were dropping, so I would say I got my sights about right on this, finally. And this thing shoots so good overall. So looking at this ammo, what I'm going to say is the 9mm I would say is a really fantastic choice for concealed carry handgun, because when I'm looking at it, it does look like it's banded, like it has a mechanical band around it the way HST does. So theoretically, it should defeat hard barriers pretty well, also like the HST. Looks like it has sealed primers, and which means it's probably sealed at the bullet end, so you don't get so much problem with bullet setback. You keep the powder dry, basically. And you have pretty much everything that you want to get, all for a box of ammo. So that's a really fantastic choice for 9mm. Now with 45 ACP, I'm also going to say this is really good load. You know, I've tested some other stuff out of this so far, and I've had better performance with other types of ammo. That being said, it was way more powerful, way more recoil. This has less recoil, or about the same as your basic target ball Winchester white box stuff, but it still performs pretty good. So overall, I would say this is a good load too. You know, this doesn't check off all the boxes. I can look at the bullet, I haven't measured them yet, but I can look at it in the gel and be like, has that expanded to 1.5 times out of this? No. But if you started bigger anyway, and you're probably still getting over a ½ inch, and you still got that 230 grain mass that's going to push it relatively deep, it's not a bad option overall. that's what you get today with these. So as always, comment, share, and like. And thanks for watching.